Welcome to Mind Shift Power Podcast, a show for teenagers and the adults who work with them, where we have raw and honest conversations. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mind Shifter. And welcome, everyone. Today we have with us Jodi Krangle from Ontario, Canada. She is a voice actor, and she's the owner of Piece of Cake Voiceovers and Vocals. She's also the host of the Audio Branding Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about voice acting as a career choice. So how are you today, Jodi?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's good to have you
That's
on.
Good.
So I'd like to dive right into the conversation. So tell us, how did
Sure.
you get into this field? What got you started?
Well, I've been musical from a very early age. My parents were very musical and encouraging of that. And I used my voice as a singer for a long time before I got into this.
Okay.
But originally, I volunteered my time at the CNIB, which is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, in 95 and 96
Oh, wow.
to read articles onto reel-to-reel tape at the time.
Tape.
So yeah, actual tape. Yeah. And I really loved both the technical and the voicing part of it. So it appealed to my right and left brain.
Okay.
So I enjoyed that a lot. And it kind of percolated in the back of my head for a number of years. I was doing internet marketing and SEO. I was an early adopter of the internet. So was doing that for a lot of time. And then in 2007, when Google became it, that was the only search engine left.
Yeah.
I got really bored. And getting really bored, I decided something should happen. So I fixed my focus elsewhere and I decided to get into voiceovers.
Oh, wow. Okay. Would you consider what you do to be fulfilling? Is it something that's like, oh, I do it because it's a job, or you really love it?
I do really love it. It's a very challenging career in that it does take a little while to be able to make a living at it because it is acting and it is a performance career, and that does take a little time to get known for it.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm mostly doing commercials and corporate narrations and the advertising, marketing, and branding aspect of this. And I find that I really love the psychology behind it. I really love the audio branding of it. The reason that people are looking for a particular sound or a voice or a piece of music or something other than the visuals to entice them into experiencing whatever it is that they're experiencing. So the projects that I participate in, I'm always interested in being right for the company and making sure that the company gets what they need from me to make that deeper connection with their audience. And sound does that for us. So it's a very fulfilling career. And I really love the aspect of it being creative without me needing to be the face person, if that makes sense.
Yep. Not in front of the camera.
Yeah. So I'm not in front of the camera. I didn't write the script. I perform it so that it sounds like something I would say, or it's coming from an authentic place within me. So that people listening think that this is something I would really say. But beyond that, it's very creatively fulfilling in a way that is less stressful for me.
Okay. Now, for those of you listening, I'm going to let you listen to a little sample of what Jodi sounds like doing exactly what she just said.
Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle, and this podcast will discuss just how sound influences our behavior.
And there you have it. And that's what Jodi's talking about, is what she sounds like. Let me ask you this. Now, your voice sounds very crisp. It has a certain soothing sound to it. However, if someone has a raspy voice or a really high squeaky voice or a really thick Spanish or Vietnamese accent, could those people do voice acting as well?
They totally could. Yeah. This is less about what your voice sounds like and more about what you do with it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So it's very important to be able to approach a script and speak it as if you're not reading and as if you are believing what it is you're saying.
Good
And
point.
that takes coaching, that takes acting lessons. This is acting. They call it voice acting for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And often when you're doing a performance on a script, you're looking at a blank wall. You're not talking to anybody, but you should be talking to one person. So you have to have a really good theater of the mind. And that comes with coaching. That comes
Okay.
with the help that's going to get you where you need to be. But that said, authenticity in voices these days is so important.
Okay.
And localization is so important. There's a place for every voice out there. It just depends on what genre you want to work in. Do you want to work in commercials or corporate narration? Do you want to work in audiobooks? Do you want to work in animation and video games? You know, there's all sorts of different genres that you can go into, and every type of voice will fit. You know, it just depends on what you want to do.
Okay, that's good to know. I think it's, as you know, this podcast is for teens and the adults who work with them. And one of the things I like to focus on here and there are different career choices. And I like to present career choices that aren't typically presented to teens.
Sure.
And I think voice acting is one of them, and I do think it's a viable one. And I think I find that people that do it tend to love it. And it's not for everyone, but who it's for, it's really for.
Yeah.
And I think some people who it's for just wouldn't even try if it wasn't presented to them,
Sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to voice acting and certain types of writing and many other careers. AI.
Mhm.
AI has taken over. AI has been a buzz topic for the past year or two, but AI has actually been around for a long time. Google is the first public usage of an AI, if you really want to look at it.
Mhm.
At least the first one that I can think of. So someone can fact check me on that one. But we have been using artificial intelligence for quite some time, I don't know, 20, 30 years now. But we just we just didn't get to the level that we're at with it right now. So with AI and AI generated voices being a thing that are used now, do you think that the need for voice acting will ever go away?
I don't think so, no, because it's called acting for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
and a computer isn't going to do that.
You know what? I agree. I've heard some things
Yeah.
on YouTube in particular that,
Mhm.
AI mispronounces stuff all the time and doesn't get cultural
Oh,
nuances
yes.
like a person would.
Yes, very much so. So, yeah, if you want your name pronounced correctly, or you want the place you lived in or live in pronounced correctly, then generally AI is not the way to go. But, I can see where it's useful. I can see where some people might need to use it because it's cheaper. It
Mm-hmm.
does take more time, though. So if there's a client or an ad agency or someone needs a voice and they don't mind cutting corners, then AI can do what they need to in a pinch. But at the same time, I talk a lot about audio branding. So when you're talking about the sound that you're associating with your company, do you want that to be an AI voice, or do you want that to be a genuine human being that can authentically connect with the people who are going to experience your business? So how do you want to show up as your business? Because your sound very much tells people who you are. Is an AI going to tell people who you are? It could, but you may not like what it's saying.
Well, and not only that, but I think AI says, I'm not human, and therefore I'm not going to deal with you as a human either. That's the
Well,
message that
it,
it
it
sends to
makes
me.
it sound cheap to me.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that's going to be forever. I mean, honestly, AI is getting better all the time. But I do think also that it takes a certain amount of programming time for the people who are
Right.
putting this together. And so, do you want to pay a voice actor to do something for you in 10 minutes that's going to take you 2 hours to program and will get you better results from the human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want to waste your 2 hours of time how much is your time worth? I guess is what I'm asking here, right? So you're either going to pay a voice actor to do something in a shorter amount of time and get a better result, or you're going to spend those 2 hours of time trying to program the AI to be like a human and do as much of that as you can, but pay less to the AI, but pay more based on how much time you're taking.
Yes.
So, it depends.
I think that's true, not just with voice acting, but with a lot of things. We tend not to count the costs correctly. It's like, oh, but this only costs so much money. Yes, but you're going to pay less money, but you're going to pay more in time and frustration sometimes
Exactly.
when you pay less money. So sometimes
Yeah.
I'd rather pay money than stress
Yeah.
and time.
And I understand that there's a time when one of them is more viable than the other.
Right,
I get
right.
that. I totally do. And I'm thinking that lower end stuff that really doesn't need a human voice, like maybe phone systems, that like IVR press 1 for whoever this name is. The only problem with that is you want to make sure the AI can pronounce the name properly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that becomes an issue. But, there are some things like I know there are a lot of explainer videos out there on YouTube that are using AI voices. I don't know, some advertisements on YouTube that are put together in probably 5 seconds use AI voices. I mean, it's kind of like spam because you know that someone is falling for it, right? Or they wouldn't keep putting it out there, but they're sending millions of these spam emails and maybe 1 or 2 people are falling for it, right? So how many millions of explainer videos do you want to put out there pissing people off before you get that 1 or 2 sale?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, to me, it doesn't make any sense, but maybe to someone else it does. I'm not saying AI is bad all over. I really love what AI does for us as far as stimulating creativity.
Right.
So
Right.
rather than expecting it to write it for you, it's really handy when you're staring at the white page and you just need a prompt to get you going.
Right. Right.
I
That's what I was
love
looking
that use of AI. I think
Yeah.
that it's perfect for that kind of thing. It kickstarts things. It keeps you from staring at that blank white page for too long, which I think is fantastic. But at the same time, I don't think it's a replacement for humans. And I don't think that it should ever be used as a replacement for humans. And I don't think that for your company, it's a good look or a good sound.
I love that you brought out that point. I want those who are considering this as a career, or just considering it. I want them to know that too, like what the realities of it are, and not think, oh, I can't get into that field because there's no future. And I do believe, I
No.
agree that AI can replace a lot, but it can do a lot, but it cannot completely replace humans in every
Yeah,
aspect.
it's
It never
not
will.
going to become humans. And if you are acting, definitely it's not going to replace you. But acting is the key part. If you're just speaking lines, yeah, sure, an AI can replace you.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. The
I
key
mean, you
thing is
need the
that it's
training.
acting.
That's
The
what the coaching
voiceovers
is
and
for.
it's acting. Even if you're reading an
Yeah,
audiobook, it is
exactly.
acting. The inflection in your
Oh,
voice.
definitely reading an audiobook. Audiobook is like perfect for like theater majors and people who love film and like, yeah, that's an actors type of medium. Like
Oh,
especially
really? Okay.
if you're doing like fiction, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
actor's, it's like audio drama.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
definitely an actor's place to be. Yeah, and I know people who love audiobooks who just live for them and they're just like making them and listening to them. So,
Wow.
I mean, that's fantastic. I don't do long form anything myself. I stop at 5 minutes of finished audio or less. That's all I do, right? But
Okay.
I'm all into the advertising, branding and marketing aspect of this. There are people who love animation. They just love it to death and they want to be a character so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's acting. That is definitely acting. And there is coaching that's needed for that. You can't just start off knowing everything because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So coaching is just the most important thing that you can do to start off because you need a demo and that demo is expensive. And if you're going to make that demo, you want to make sure you're ready and your coach is the one who's going to tell you if you're ready.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Um, let me ask you another question. When it comes to location, in that, in being a voice actor, does your location where you physically live, does that really matter that much?
Not as much as you might think. It depends again on what genres you're trying to get into. If you want to be in animation, it's becoming less and less needed, but LA is really the place to be for
Oh, okay.
animation. Um, there are some places, I think Texas has a lot of anime and video game stuff that's going through there.
Hmm.
So, again, that can be a good place to be. Toronto
Texas.
just opened up a Netflix studio, I believe.
Oh, wow.
So,
Didn't know
yeah,
that.
so dubbing is, for particular voices is going to become a really big thing here because they do a lot
I
of,
had someone recently bring that up to me.
yeah,
He didn't know I was going to interview you, but it just reminded me of this conversation. It made me think of this conversation because
yep,
he was showing me examples of dubbing that he's done for himself, and he did a really good job. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
actually thought that he was the voice of the character I was looking at, and
yeah.
I didn't know that that was such a big thing, and I found it kind of fascinating.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that Netflix produces that are in other languages.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Specifically Korean. Actually, they
Hmm.
do a lot of Korean dramas and
Hmm. Some of them are
science
actually pretty
fiction,
good. I'm not
fantasy
gonna lie.
dramas, and stuff like that, right? But they need English dubbing voices and
Right.
Spanish speaking as well. Like that's huge, right?
Hmm.
So they need dubbing voices that are going to take on the characters for these shows of theirs. And yeah, these days it's less important where you are because a lot of people have home studios. Like I
Right.
have a home studio right behind me.
Hmm.
That's, I work from home all the time. So really it doesn't matter where you are. In certain instances, it does depend on what genres you want to be in.
Very good details to know, because I wouldn't have known that either. So thank you for pointing those things out. Now let's talk about pros and cons, because I think that we should
Sure.
always think about, uh, pros and cons of anything we're going to get into career wise or anything else really. So what would you consider to be, we'll start off with the cons of getting into voice acting, and then we could talk about the pros.
Okay. It takes a while.
Okay. What is
It's
a
not
while?
going to make you money overnight. And if anyone tells you that, they are lying to you and run
Hmm.
away really quick.
What would you
Again,
consider a while?
well, I will say, for instance, for me, it took me about 2.5 years to be able to make a viable full time living.
Oh, okay.
And that was just matching what I had made in internet marketing and SEO. And that wasn't all that fantastic. It was certainly 5 figures. It was not into 6 figures.
Okay.
And, but there's no real limit. That's the really interesting thing about this. Like
Hmm.
I have far surpassed that now after 16 years. It takes a while, but yeah, I mean, it's going to take a while to make any money at this because it's not something that happens overnight. You have to build up clientele. You have to get a lot of pies to put your fingers in. So
Hmm.
there's online casting sites, there's agents, there's reaching out directly to particular ad agencies and video production companies and places that make these types of content that need a voice. There's all sorts of other ways that you can get your voice in front of people. But just to start off, you need the coaching, and then the coaching to tell you you're ready for the demo. And then the demo, at least a commercial and a narration demo, maybe a commercial narration and animation demo, if that's
Hmm.
what you want to get into. And then you need a website, you need a calling card. So, some website is kind of iffy. I would say you could probably, if you had your fingers in enough pies, get away without having a website, but your website sells for you 24/7. And it's a really good thing to have if you
Yeah.
can.
W-
So,
there's so many ways of having free websites. They're not going to
yes.
be the most dynamic websites, but you just need something that sells your skill and shows people what you can
Yeah.
do, right?
You have a short bio, you maybe have a picture of yourself and you have your demos on there and they're easily downloadable. Make sure that they can be downloaded because
Okay.
No one wants to come to your website and not be able to download your demos because the agents or the clients or whatever, they want to download it so they can show it to other people. They want to be able to do that so they can choose if they want you or someone else. And if they can't download your demo, they're not going to choose you. So, yeah.
Would a YouTube
kind of
channel
important.
work for that?
Pardon me?
Would a YouTube channel work for that?
Yeah, it could. It totally could.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say that it's not ideal because then you're relying on YouTube and YouTube can shut you down at any time.
You know what? You're right. They've become more and more censored, and more people are not putting things on there because they're getting a little too sensory.
Any social media at all. That's why it's a good idea to have your own website, because then at least you have control over that one medium. And if it goes down, it's your host, but at least you have some recourse.
Good point. So now you're all hearing why she's recommending a website.
Yeah.
Because there
are a lot of people who don't have a website who are completely successful voice actors, and people regularly use their voices all the time. Most of those people are relying entirely on agents for their work. And some people can do that.
But if you can't afford one,
it's hard. Yeah. Well, I mean, agents don't get paid unless you get paid, because typically they get, if you're in the union, they only get 10%. If you're non-union, they can get anywhere from 10 to 25%. I've seen. It just depends.
Okay. I didn't even know that either. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So any more pros and cons you want to list?
Well, I mean, like I said, cons, it's going to take some time. So I would suggest to anyone who's younger, who's starting out in this, don't rely on it for your full-time living in the beginning, and don't stop school.
Yeah.
This is not an instead of school type of career, I would suggest. But I think you can do it safely and well, even part-time. I think it's good to do that. And learning is key. So the coaching is key. Getting a good demo is key. The demo costs money. So make sure that the coach tells you you're ready before you do that. And so it's going to take time. It can be very nice to help fund school, though. So, depending on how well you're doing, it can really be a great part-time job to have while you're in school. So I do recommend it for that if you can pull it off. The equipment is coming down in price at this moment, but it still is a little bit pricey. I mean, you're still going to have to get yourself a treated space. You're still going to have to invest in a microphone. Doesn't have to be a hugely expensive microphone. You can wait until you're actually making money at it before you start investing in a really good mic. But you need a condenser mic. Specifically, you need an audio interface, because generally you don't want a USB mic, because they just don't have the same kind of sensitivity as the kind of condenser mic you're going to need for the quality you need for voice acting.
Oh.
You can get away with it for podcasts, and I'm using a USB condenser mic right now that sounds perfectly fine, but I wouldn't suggest this necessarily for voice acting.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So because you really need, it's a very specific nuance. The voice, you need to have the full rounded effect of that voice, and you don't want any any frequency that's not at its peak. Like you don't you don't want to have a microphone that keeps your voice from being displayed in the way that it should be.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Right. So you want something that is going to give you as natural a sound to your voice as is possible. Again, depending on the genre. But generally, you're probably going to want a mic that's a condenser mic with a cardioid direction, probably in and around the $150 to $300 mark to start with. The audio interface, again, anywhere from $150 to $300. You need a computer, and you need a software package. Probably like Audacity would work. That's free.
Yep, Audacity.
Guitar, GarageBand, I think is free on.
It's similar
Twisted
to
Wave is another one on a Mac. Audition, Adobe Audition is what I use, but I do pay a monthly membership.
Oh, okay.
So there is a certain amount of equipment that you need along with a sound treated environment in order to be able to do this professionally on a regular basis. So that takes a little bit of time to put together. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it's hugely expensive. You could probably do all of it for less than $1,000.
Okay.
But, but at the same, and those prices are coming down all the time. But at the same time, you do need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it does take a little bit of time and organization and having a space in your house that you can do this.
Thank
And
you.
yeah.
Thank you for giving us some very specific details and realistic information, because that was one of the reasons I asked you on the show, was because I knew you would do that. Give the realities of what it takes.
Sure.
And make sure that people don't have myths about it and that it's magical. As people tend to think that way.
There are a ton of pros. I mean, I love what I do every day. It's a different client every day. It's different work every day. It's exciting. It's wonderful to be the voice of a product and have them, trust your voice to sell or, not sell their product, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's enormously rewarding work and it can pay very well. So and you can do it really from anywhere for the most part. So there are a lot of great pros, but you have to be aware of the cons as well.
Yeah, good point. I was thinking, if I was to do any of that, I would probably play a character in a cartoon, because
Sure.
that would fit my personality.
Yeah.
Someone who's a smart ass with a lot of little attitude. That'd be perfect for me.
That'd be great.
Who laughs a lot.
Definitely.
Really wouldn't be too much acting, but I could see myself, if
they
anything,
all come
doing
from
that.
a point of authenticity, right? They all come from a point.
Yeah.
It's you, but slightly different, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if I was going to ask you, how can a teen get into this field? But I really think you kind of answered most of that already.
You know what? I'll give you a website that they can check out if they want to get more information and they want to figure out who the good coaches are, because a lot of them are listed on that website.
Oh, okay.
It's called voiceoverextra.com, voiceoverextra.com. And maybe you can put that in the show notes.
Yeah, I will definitely
add
it in the show notes.
Yeah, if they check that out, they'll see that there are workshops that they can purchase for like $50 just to watch the workshop and see what happened. You can audit classes that come in. So if you're not one of the people that's going to be taken up on stage to actually do a reading, you can be in the audience for a lot less money, depending on what genre you want to go into. You can just watch a workshop at the actual time, or you could because I think then you get a replay as well as part of the package. There are a lot of the coaches are listed on that website. There are some great articles. It's really for working voice actors. So,
wow, that's excellent. Yeah. Thank you for that resource, and I will absolutely add that to the show notes so that those of you who are interested can go there. So, last but not least, tell people, how can we find you?
Sure. I am at voiceoversandvocals.com if they want to check out my work, and if they want to check out the podcast where I talk about the power of sound and how it influences our buying decisions, but also our daily lives all over the place. That's called the Audio Branding Podcast, and that is at audiobrandingpodcast.com.
I want to add to that, for the Audio Branding Podcast, I actually am talking to the audience right now. I actually listened to a couple of episodes of that, and I'm not going to lie, you did some mind shifting on me, because I never thought about the importance of sound in some of the ways that I could totally see everything that you and your guests were talking about.
I'm glad. Yeah.
And I don't remember the man's name, but there was this one particular one, and you were talking about the importance of sound and how it affects us on a psychological level. And I'm all into anything psychological. So I really could hear what you were saying, and I found it fascinating. So I do highly recommend that you guys take a listen to the podcast, because you'll probably learn something or gain a new perspective that you just never thought about before. I did.
Thank you. I'm glad you had a good time listening.
I did. And so, Jodi, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time and volunteering your time and expertise to hopefully help someone out there who's looking to get into doing what you do.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I encourage anyone to look into it. And yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. I don't coach, but I'm happy to answer questions if someone has them.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks.
And now for a mind-shifting moment. I want to take a moment right now and shift your thinking a little bit. So we talked about a career that most people don't think of getting into, even when they should. Voice acting is not something that is typically presented to our youth as a viable career, yet it is. Sometimes we need to think outside of the box of what we want to do and where we want to go. Sometimes, in order to find that beautiful spot, that a career or whatever that we would love, we have to think outside the box. So I ask you this question. What is waiting on the other side of your thinking that would also be lucrative and rewarding? I don't want you to answer that for me. I want you to answer that for you. Thank you for listening to Mindshift Power Podcast. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at The Mindshifter. If you have any comments, topic suggestions, or would like to be a guest on the show, please visit fatimabay.com/podcast. Remember, there's power in shifting your thinking. Tune in for next week.